Before we start, on behalf of myself and all panelists, thank you so much to New Direction for hosting this Think Tank Central. It's great to be amongst like-minded people, to have the opportunity to speak to you today. I think this is a very timely session looking at the concept of economic freedom. As we know, over the last 18 months, we've seen huge impositions on economic freedom right across the globe, huge amounts of government spending, trade restrictions, closed borders, quantitative easing, massive welfare bills, both in terms of corporate welfare and also individual welfare, all of which has to be paid for, whether that's through extra borrowing or higher taxes. And we're seeing that firsthand in the UK right now. Recent announcement about a hike in national insurance tax, taking us up to the highest levels of taxation we've seen in the UK in decades. And yet at the same time, we know that those countries that are free economically do the best around the world. The Fraser Institute's recent report, Economic Freedom of the World, once again has demonstrated that economically free countries are richer, more prosperous, they grow faster, they're happier, and they're healthier. And yet we see restrictions on economic freedom in plenty of countries all around the world. So this is a paradox. To tell us more about these issues and their particular perspectives on them, we've got a great panel in front of us today. I'd like to ask each of the panelists to make some introductory remarks, then we'll have a bit of Q&A on the stage before I come to the audience, so please do think about what questions you have, and I'll make sure we finish at 1:15 in time for coffees. So without further ado, Marko, perhaps you could begin.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone that's in the organization of this conference. It's a big honor for me and for my party to be a part of it. The New Perspective initiative, or NGO, as a think tank, is going to promote conservative values inside of Croatia and Europe. We consider economic freedom a keystone element in the prosperity of the future of Croatia, but there have been a lot of problems in this segment in Croatia's society and politics. The Croatian people fought for their freedom and paid a big price for it during the 90s. And we had a much more optimistic view on the future of Croatia, but it seems that we are falling behind more and more. I think we're on the bottom of the economic freedom scale when it comes to Europe, the EU. I think only Greece is doing more poorly than us, which is a big problem. I think it stems from our Yugoslavian period and socialist mentality that was somehow intertwined inside of our culture and politics. The process of going out of socialism and accepting democracy and capitalism is still not finished. It's an ongoing process, and it's going very slowly, which is hindering our economic and sorry, I lost for words. Our economic growth. It's a big problem we didn't fully disassemble in the 90s. We started it. We started with the privatization of the national owned firms, corporations, and everything else, but it took a wrong turn. And to this day, when you mention privatization in Croatia, it's like a swear word. It's the same with entrepreneurship. And it's a big problem that we are trying to fix. And with each year, we can see little increments and little step-by-steps in the right direction, but it's really going slow. I think of it as the story of Moses. He went 40 years through the desert, wandering. But I think the real reason why he was going 40 years through the desert is to change the mentality of the people. There needed to be a change in the, let's say, generational thinking of the people. And I think Croatia is on that way, but we have to continue on the path of economic freedom and promote everything that is around economic freedom in Croatia. We can't stop, because if we do, it's very easy to fall back into the socialist thinking and the doctrine that was indoctrinated during Yugoslavia. I'm more of a person for dialogue, but I hope that you see the perspective that Croatia is in right now. We can see even entering the Eurozone. We are underway with Bulgaria of joining the Eurozone, and it's one step closer to, let's say, more economic freedom. But at the same time, we are losing a part of our monetary sovereignty, and I'm not sure it's a win-win. I'm more of the believe that it's a lose-lose for everyone. But we'll see what comes.
Thank you everyone, and thank you, Nick. It's a great honor to be here, and it's also great to be back in person conference, really. I think everyone is tired of webinar, even if webinar save also our job. Because so really, I'm Lorenzo Montanari. I'm here representing Americans for Tax Reform in this panel. ATR, I don't know if you are familiar, was founded under the request of Ronald Reagan in 1985 to support the tax reform, and since then became an influential think tank, advocacy organization with two main pillars. One is proposing the taxpayer pledge, so we submit this simple piece of paper to everyone is running for office. We will love in the future also Democrats, but and they signed, they swear they will never vote for any tax increase. Now 90% of Republicans, they signed the pledge, and since the pledge really became an influential tool, Republicans, they start again winning the House and the Senate. Because before 1994, the Republican basically, they won, they governed only for 4 years, the House and the Senate. So saying that, the second pillar is the Wednesday meeting. Since you mentioned the International Coalition meeting, is that we really are committed to build coalitions between conservative, free market, libertarian, moderate Republican, and to strengthen the freedom movement in the US, but also all over the world. So these are the two main pillars that, and also I'm wearing the second hat. It is a Property Right Alliance, that is an organization affiliated to Americans for Tax Reform in charge of publishing the International Property Right Index, and recently in 2018, the Trade Barrier Index. So economic freedom. It's very difficult to speak after the wonderful presentation by Yaron Brook, because you said everything. I'm sorry. I'm just repeating badly what is economic freedom. So economic freedom is basically based in the concept of self-ownership. So because of this self-ownership, people has the right to choose their time and talent to reshape their life. So we need to refresh the memory that the cornerstone of economic freedom is open market, freedom of choice, something that has been affected in the US, European Union. Every time the government tries to regulate our life, is limiting the freedom of choice. Voluntary exchange, open market, and strong property rights. So this year is the 3rd anniversary of the Jean Paul II encyclica, Centesimus Annus. And I like to tie this to the economic freedom, because I think it's extremely important that we, as a conservative, as a free marketer, we stress the point of the dignity of work, the work as a vocation, and also the work is extremely related to economic freedom and also to the common good. Because if we believe in economic freedom, it's because we want to perceive the common good for the society. And so I would say that, as Lee Edward reminds us, that freedom of the person is the primary and central end of a political society. So this brings me another point. How should we measure, define economic freedom? So there are very interesting policy tool, index, that most 90% are being produced by free market think tank. So they help us to understand the level of status of economic freedom around the world. And this is very useful, and I stress everyone to use this index. It could be the Economic Freedom Index of the World Fraser Institute, the Economic Freedom Heritage Foundation, the Human Freedom Index of Cato, and also the International Property Right Index and the Free Trade Barrier Index. We believe that property rights are the backbone of a free market society. Without property rights, we cannot develop or we cannot defend even our freedom, as Frederick von Hayek reminds us. So this is what we should focus on. And bring me another point, how should we relaunch and redefine economic freedom, if not working to strengthen rule of law, property right again, intellectual property right, innovation, competition, in order to achieve prosperity. So this is more or less what I want to share with you. I mean, if we go through all these indexes I mentioned, we discovered that even United States, for example, is not so free in terms of free trade, for example. According to our indices, number 54, because there is a huge regulation of agricultural sector, or they have very few free trade agreements. So we really look at one of the reasons we developed this free trade barrier is because we want to contrast the protectionist policy of President Trump. He did a great job on taxation, but on protectionism, it was the tariff are taxation on goods and services. So this is something we need to remind, we need to be honest among ourselves. In the same time, there are a lot of examples of how, as a conservative free market, we fought and we won in the terms of economic freedom. The recent 2017 tax reform that finally reduced the taxation, the corporate tax from the 35 to 25%, I consider we should consider a great achievement and also a model to follow for other countries. Consider the United States was at the time one of the highest corporate tax in the world, higher than China, that is 25. But just to mention something, and how should we develop our public policy based on data? So I stress everyone to use index to defeat the leftist narrative. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
So,
Elmars.
yeah, thank you. It's actually really nice to see people in person after this whole COVID time. And I like Microsoft Teams, but this is better. I come from Latvia. I'm executive director of Latvian Ekonomistu Association. Actually, our think tank is one of the oldest NGOs in Latvia, and we have actually worked on a couple of national economical development programs. The first was actually made in '94 when Latvia was transforming from Soviet-style model to free market model. And later on, the next program was implemented how to get Latvia actually into European Union. Okay, but times have changed. That's why now we are working on the next model, how to make Latvia sustainable and a green one. Nowadays, it becomes more challenging to define what's economical freedom because we have taken, we need to address certain issues as sustainability, circular economy, industry 4.0, and of course, the free and fair trade. So, but I want to address free values, which are, from our perspective, the main ones, which actually European Union has to address. The first one is, if we're making new free trade agreements, the green ones, we have to find the mechanisms how to make them more beneficial than the standard ones. Because if we want to oppose regulations or some tax system on like less greener or non-green trade agreements, it will, for example, imagine a ship. The ship is an economy, and regulations are like those barnacles which are growing on the hull of the ship. They will just go more and more and more, and then eventually the ship will start to slow down. The economy will slow down. And the only way how you can get rid of those barnacles, the ship has to go in port. The economy has to go into crisis, and that's the only way how actually you can change it. So EU has to find a better way, not how to make things more expensive, but how to make green more beneficial for all parties. So that's one value about the freedom of trade. The second one, it's the technological development in Industry 4.0 have changed our lives dramatically. No, this is really nice, but it also consumes electricity. We're really dependent on electricity and energy as a whole. Talking with colleagues yesterday, also in Latvia, the prices of electricity has increased by 100%. In some countries, it's like 200%. So, affordable energy, it's a crucial part of modern economical freedom. No, industries will not grow without electricity, which is affordable. The society will have a lot of issues if the electricity will be too high, especially for less developed countries in EU. No, because our competitiveness and all social issues are closely related to the bills from electricity. So if we want green, we need green electricity, but we still need clean and affordable energy for everybody. That should be a crucial part for all Europe, not just left on any country for themselves. No, okay, one issue could be which should be discussed, maybe atomic energy in the nuclear facilities maybe should be developed, because wind will not be efficient in the future. So the second one's on energy. And the third one, which is, we worked on one interesting project. It was called From Concrete to Human. We really need to address human capital development programs, because we search a lot of, especially Latvians, but also other European Union member state programs from the RRF funds. You can call it one way or another. If you want to invest in education, you build a building. If you want to invest in the healthcare, you build a building. Everything is going on concrete side. The investment program should really focus on how to develop human capital, how to make good places for entrepreneurs to grow. Don't make regulations, give the entrepreneurs a chance. The local governments have to work on good job economies, because especially in Latvia, we have a lot of industries who are, they will not be able to provide good salaries, never, in transit sector or something. But I'm seeing we have a lot of good startups in Latvia, but they're growing 100% a year. No, that's the industry which we should focus on. How to make good jobs, good places where entrepreneurs can accelerate, and that's how the growth actually should be in the future. So that's from our side. So
thank you, Elmars. Yaron, we obviously had the pleasure of hearing you speak. Is there anything you'd like to add, or would you like to perhaps re-inject a bit of optimism after we've been brought back down with the pessimism again?
No, I think we're back to the pessimism. I'll just say a few words and then we'll see. One of I think the most shocking things to come out of COVID is how unfree we are. People expressed worry about China earlier and about China's influence in Europe and China's influence in the world because they're going to buy up stuff. It's too late, guys. We are China. So just a couple of examples. No public health administration in the West had as a plan to deal with a pandemic lockdowns. Lockdowns do not appear in the CDC's plans of how to deal with the pandemic. China did it. We copied it without hesitation, without debate, without discussion, with no vote. It was just executively imposed upon us. Not even parliamentary votes. I mean, it's shocking how quickly and easily we were willing to give up our freedoms. Government got to decide what is an essential worker and what is not an essential worker. What? I think every worker is essential, particularly for themselves. They're trying to make a living and feed their families. But the government decided, you go to work, you don't. By what right? And yet we all allowed that to happen. The solution to what to do with all these people who are out of work now was what? Well, let's just write them a check. We'll just write checks to everybody. Every country had this program of just writing everybody checks to stay home. Now, that's a Chinese solution. It's not. That is not a capitalist, a free market solution to these problems. I think one of the stories that are going to be told in the future, one of the narratives that are going to be dominant, is that the left is going to say, look, government intervention worked. Government controls worked. Governments gave us the vaccines. Government provided us with all these benefits. And they're going to use it to justify the growth of the state and more intervention and more central planning. We better have an alternative story, an alternative narrative. I think it's a simple one. I don't think it's that hard. Governments are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. They failed completely. And the vaccines were a product of private enterprise, private business. 2 days it took Moderna and the German company, BioNTech, 2 Turkish immigrants, by the way, but that's a separate question we can talk about. But those 2 companies took them 2 days because they'd already built a platform for mRNA vaccines to produce the vaccines. Everybody was saying it'd take 5 years to get a vaccine to COVID. We got it in a few months. And we can talk about distribution and the distribution of vaccine, which is a disaster because it was run by the government. No market principles were used. Not pricing, not distribution. Imagine if Amazon was responsible for distributing the vaccines vis-a-vis the states. I mean, we'd have been vaccinated, all of us, a long time before we were. So I think there's a lot to learn from COVID. I fear, and I'm pretty confident in this fear, unfortunately, that we're going to learn the wrong lessons. And this is going to only embolden the statists to control our economies even more. And I really, the thing that scares me the most is a tendency I see among conservatives to believe that the state should have a bigger and bigger role in the economy. We've seen that in the United States with national conservatism, with the rise of the idea of industrial policy among conservatives, the anti-trade ideas that came out of the Trump administration but are now popular among conservatives. Who is going to defend free markets when you guys don't? I think that's the real challenge that we face. We need to, all the issues of trade, every single objection to trade that I've heard, Adam Smith dealt with quite brilliantly 240 years ago. I don't know of any economist who's contradicted him on any one of those points. So let's go back to those basic freedom-aligned principles.
Brilliantly put. Thank you, Yaron. And good to have a bit of a dose of pessimism from you as well. As I said at the outset, we're amongst like-minded individuals, but there's not a lot of point in sort of violently agreeing with each other on stage. So I'd like to start, Lorenzo, by challenging some of your views about property rights. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen a rise of the left, certainly in the UK, where I'm based, is a lot of people feel disenfranchised and they feel like there's gross inequality between the haves and the have-nots. And a lot of that fundamentally comes down to the fact that property rights are very well protected. We might think that's a good thing, but what's your answer to that challenge and those people, and there's millions of them, hundreds of millions around the world, who feel disenfranchised and blame that system of property rights for it?
Well, thank you for the question, because one of the things we do day by day is defending property right, as I mentioned before, as the backbone of any free market economy. And we have a great relationship with Hernando de Soto, that is spending his life to defend, advocate for property right, and explaining that, let's put in very simple words, property rights are human rights, period. And this is the message that every time we carry when we go in a country like in Venezuela. I remember in 2014, we presented the index in Caracas, and with our partners, CEDICE is the only free market think tank that survived or is still surviving the Chavismo. And I remember that when I basically said property right, human right, people that were looking like, oh, wow, I didn't know, I never think about it this way. So we need to learn from each other how to reshape the narrative and let me allow it to and sell our idea in a different way. And when I was in Caracas, I remember that Rocio Guijarro, the director of CEDICE, told me something that struck me a lot. At the time we were in 2013. In 2007, there was a referendum in Venezuela to basically rewrite again the constitution that already Chavez approved in 1998-2000, to redefine and rewrite the concept of property right. This is the only referendum at the time, or let's say electoral turnout, that Chavez lost. And you know who voted against this referendum? 80% of the poor people. Poor people understood better all this bunch of socialists. They tried to defend them, that property right is the only way they can get rid of poverty. And this was a huge shock for the socialist movement in Venezuela. Since then, they never try again to rechange the idea of property right. So I think we should think in this way, because our main goal, if we believe in a market economy, is because we want to get rid of poverty. We want to fight for a common good. And if we rewrite the narrative in a way that we are the good people and not the leftists, we win any type of battle. So property right, I think, and I stress everyone, fight in your country, because it could be property right in Venezuela. For example, I don't know if you follow the debate in South Africa. The Ramaphosa government in the last 2 years is pushing to implement the same type of policy that Mugabe in Zimbabwe implemented in 1992. What is this type of policy? Abolishing property right, expropriation without compensation. This is the policy that the South African government is pushing right now. And we work a lot with the Free Market Foundation in South Africa. We run a lot of coalition letters. This is exactly the way, because they say abolishing property right, you will give the land to everyone. And this is a big lie. South Africa, since President Ramaphosa announced the policy, South Africa dropped of 15 points in our index. And we were there. The following year presented the index and explaining that this is exactly what they should not do. Abolish property right. They should expand the property right to everyone. I can talk about intellectual property right. But anyway, we don't need to go to South Africa to see that also intellectual property rights are affected. You see the Biden administration is pushing for the IP waiver with the excuse that abolishing intellectual property right, it will allow everyone to get a vaccine. And this is another big lie. And I'm very surprised that the United States, with Biden, of course, is following the path of South Africa and India. The real reason that if there is a shortage of vaccine is because there are still 608 non-tariff measures that are blocking the selling of raw material. This is the truth. It's not intellectual property right. We have a vaccine because we have an intellectual property right system.
Thanks, Lorenzo. You started to move on there to non-tariff barriers, trade, and it's something, Elmars, that you talked about a little bit, some of the issues on the horizon for free trade. You come from Latvia. It's a country that obviously doesn't have huge economic weight to bring to bear in terms of trade negotiations, and of course the EU stands in its way anyway. So bearing that in mind, what do you think the options are for smaller nations to actually open up trading opportunities and have free trade? And surely there needs to be multilateral organizations and approaches, and you have to work through organizations like the EU to make the sort of progress you would want to see.
So, no, we need such organizations, but it's always complex. The World Trade Organization, it's not working. No, it hasn't been working, and I think it will not continue working as it should be, because still there are bad practices all across the world where there's subsidizing specific industries, specific places where our European companies cannot actually develop those specific industries because they're subsidized in different countries. as a European Union, they should acknowledge those industries and work like how to make the trade fair. But for small countries as Latvia, no, usually it's quite interesting because we're on border with Russia, and everything changes when there are new sanctions. We understand the situation with Russia. We know, but a lot of times the sanctions are put up without any economical valuation, how it will affect the small countries by the border. So European Union has to be open-minded, but still quite conservative on free trade. It should be a free trade, and if you want to put some sanctions on, be more direct to regime or something, but not for specific products.
Okay, so a sort of lukewarm approval of some things the European Union does there. And in a similar vein, and at the risk of sort of looking like some sort of mad Europhile, which I'm not, by the way, I did vote for Brexit. Marko, I'd love your opinion on the impact that the European Union has had on Croatia, because we've heard quite a lot about some of the issues with the way the European Union operates, but obviously Croatia's been on quite a journey over, well, decades, not just the last 20, 30 years. So on balance, European Union, force for good or otherwise?
I'm a Euro realist, and I think a superstate is not what the Croatian people want. Sometimes we like to call it Euroslavia. It's a resemblance of some parts of Yugoslavia in the sense of democracy and decentralization that is going on. But I have to say, in terms of economic freedom, it has been a good journey for Croatia, joining the European Union. I doubt that we would be at this level if we didn't join the EU. Some things were mandatory when on our trip, the voyage to the European Union, and a lot of things were good. Now, keeping that in mind, our sovereignty, which was the last panel that was discussed here, is a big part of our identity. And for the conservative part of Croatia, it's hard to let go of those things. And the European Union, we're in a love-hate relationship at the moment. I think we have a lot of problems that are still not fully functional. Everyone's talking here about the rule of law in Poland or Hungary. The rule of law in Croatia is, if not worse than them, but nobody's talking about it because we have a government that's going with the grain of the European Union. And there is no backbone that we had in the 90s. In the 90s, we had a diplomatic relations that were pragmatic, but we had a line that we didn't cross. I don't see that line at the moment from our government, and I think it's a big hindrance on our prosperity. There are a lot of mistakes that were made during this time, and maybe economic freedom, if we're on the subject, we have a lot of problems with our demographic situation in Croatia. Nearly 500,000 people left Croatia. And for the Croatian people, it's normal to go to other countries and work. My grandfather worked in Germany for, I think, 15, 16 years, but he came back. His family was here. Today, we see whole families leaving, and they have nothing to come back to. Their fathers, their mothers, they're going to die soon. They're probably in pensioners, right? And they left. And I think a big part of it is the economic freedoms. You can't have economic freedom in a country that is run by the government and where 60% of the GDP or the economic sector is based and connected to the government. It's just impossible. I think it's a process, and as I said, I think it will take a few generations to change the mindset of the Croatian people, for them to understand. And what you said was fully correct. We need to put the stats there. They need to know them, and we need to show them in Croatia that this is the way for the prosperity of the Croatian people.
Thanks, Marko. Before I throw it open to the floor, I'm going to give Yaron an opportunity just to bring us back into happier climes. Yaron, you talked a bit about the risk of learning the wrong lessons from COVID on economic freedom. Where do you find cause for optimism? Where are either the countries, the parties, the individuals who are learning the right lessons and who can lead and be in the vanguard of a return towards economic freedom principles?
Well, you know, it's hard to be optimistic right now in that regard because I don't think there are many who are doing that, or are many who are willing to stand up to the forces of statism and state power from an economic perspective that are rising all over the world. You know, you're seeing a retreat from free market and free market rhetoric everywhere. Certainly, you know, to the extent that China was successful, it was successful because it had some freedom. That is being withdrawn. One of the reasons I'm not that worried about China is because I think as they withdraw from the freedoms that they had for their businesses, they will become poorer. Their economic growth will go down. We're already seeing it. You're already reading the headlines right now about the big bankruptcy. They've got real problems. They've got much bigger problems than we have from an economic perspective. Their wealth is going to decline, and therefore their power will decline. Freedom leads to prosperity. Lack of freedom leads to lack of prosperity. That is a formula that over the last 250 years we should have learned. The Economic Freedom Index suggests that. You can just see that. China is repressing economic freedom right now on the sectors that used to be free. Therefore, they're going to get poorer. They're not going to get richer. So let's focus on the real problem, which is us and our lack of economic freedom. So I see, you know, the Republican Party in the United States moving away from economic freedom, from an agenda of economic freedom. And I don't see who in Europe right now, with some exceptions, Barbara obviously being one of them, you know, really advocating and promoting these ideas. The source of optimism I have is that truth and reality are on the side of economic freedom. It works. And I think that the world is going to discover the hard way over the next few years and decades that the policies that we're embracing today and have been embracing over the last certainly 20 years, since the days of Reagan and Thatcher, are policies that are going to make the world worse. And they're going to create, you know, who knows how this monetary experiment is going to end? Not well, I can guarantee that. Who knows how a lot of the experiments with big governments, whether at the Euro or in Washington, D.C., are going to end, but I can guarantee they won't end well. And then the question is there enough of us then to propose proper solutions, propose pro-freedom solutions to the problems, and you know, advocate for free markets, which are the way to solve the problem. So I think every one of the issues raised, the solution should be always, you should always think about more freedom. More freedom is almost always the solution to a problem. It's never less freedom. And if we get ourselves oriented around that, I think we win.
Thanks, Yaron. I'd like to see if there's any questions from the floor. We'll start here, please.
It's coming.
If there's anyone else, if you want to just catch mine now.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Robert Roos. I am an ECR MEP from the Netherlands. I was an entrepreneur all my life. I went into politics because I thought it was necessary to bring some common sense in Brussels. And I believe in economic freedom. I'm also in the Litre committee, and I have a lot of discussion with Mr. Timmermans, who's brought his EU Green Deal. My question is about that. The EU Green Deal, it's not only telling us what we should do, but also how we should do it. They use taxonomy to steer it, and they use the European Central Bank to provide the money. How do you look at this situation? I'm worried about the economic freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a question for anybody in particular?
Who wants to answer it?
Okay.
But I hope for a positive answer. So maybe Mr. Brook.
I mean, I think it's a disaster. I think it's a disaster on every front. You'd think that, again, over the last 250 years, we've had enough experience with central planning to know it doesn't work. And the New Deal, the Green New Deal of the European Union, or the ones being proposed in the United States, are central planning on steroids. They're central planning the most important segment of our economy that every other segment of the economy depends on, which is energy. Instead of allowing the market to work, instead of deregulating nuclear, for example, instead of deregulating energy markets and allowing fracking in Europe so that you can get the cheap natural gas that is underneath the ground right there waiting to be exploited, you're creating, fantasies. Fantasies that, the German economy is going to run by solar panels. Have you ever been to Germany? I mean, how many days of sunshine are there in Germany? You're not going to run the German economy on solar or wind, right? It's bizarre, right? It's delusional. It's delusional central planning. It's no different than the 5-year economic plans coming out of the Soviet Union, which were delusional, that had no relationship to reality, and were completely unconnected. And we should dismiss them completely. The solution to issues of energy is to let the market work and find ways to encourage market solutions for these problems. And the primary solution for energy ultimately has to be nuclear if you care about carbon emissions. Otherwise, it's natural gas.
Thank you. I assume that was the answer you're looking for. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Anna Velish, Edmund Burke Foundation and White House Writers Group. So I actually would like to ask Mr. Brook a question. I enjoyed the speech. I missed part of your second presentation, but your speech gave me a lot to think about. So I have a very short question, but I would like to define the terms of the question before I ask it. So one, I would argue that China did not open up, but made people believe they're opened up enough and seduced the West to invest Western money in China and to make the Western companies so beholden and their bottom line so attached to China performing that they're actually now doing their bidding even on policy front, at least the way it looks from the United States. As far as, first of all, I believe in free markets. I do believe that they're the only way we can pull anybody out of poverty, so that's an important thing. But the first thing is China. The second one, conservatives walking away from their support for the markets. I think the markets walked away from the conservatives, and the conservatives finally woke up to the fact that while they're defending the Silicon Valley and arguing for lower taxes, Silicon Valley goes after them with all they've got, shutting down their accounts, shutting down their electronic wallets, stopping dissemination of information vital for their performance in national elections. It's a long list, and I really didn't stand up to make a speech, so I'll stop there. Mr. Brook said what we need is more economic freedom. And my question starts with this. I think it should be with what the first panel said, with more responsibility. And my question to you is because we're looking, all of us, we're looking at this conference we all speak with accent, most of us do, and we came from particular places that we hold dear, which is mostly why anybody has any interest in politics, because there is something that really doesn't pay for them to care about, and yet you do. So my question to you is, does capital have a homeland and a responsibility?
That's quite a setup. So, no, it's a great question, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the commentary you made. I've just got so much to say about everything you said. But so let me give you some perspective on me, because I think that'll maybe that'll give you. My children are a fourth generation born on a different continent. I am an immigrant to the United States. I left my homeland and now consider the United States my homeland because I chose it as a homeland because I value freedom. That was a choice I made. So did you, it sounds like. I encourage everybody to choose their homeland. to make choices about where they live, not to just accept where they live because that's where their ancestors lived. I think that's part of what freedom means, and that's why I'm generally pro-immigration. I want to give people opportunity to choose their homeland. Capital does not have a homeland. I don't think capital should have a homeland. I'd like to see capital be free to move around the world and create value wherever it finds value. We're going to disagree about China. Yes, there's a lot of issues and a lot of problems about China. I don't think they come from the fact that Western companies invested in China. I think they come from the way our politicians behave toward China. I think it starts with Richard Nixon going to China and meeting a monster like Mao Zedong, which was a travesty and should have never happened. I think it comes from the fact that Hong Kong was overtaken by China last year, and not a word, not a peep from our political leaders, including Republicans, Donald Trump, nothing, not a word. I would have liked to see our embassy closed in Beijing if they're going to behave in that way. If they're going to have concentration camps, if they're going to take over Hong Kong, if they're going to destroy freedom for their own people and for others, then we should not recognize them. We should not sit at the UN with them, talk about multilateral organizations. We should not be sitting in the Security Council with them. We should not accept them as a legitimate regime. Talk about sovereignty. Sovereignty comes from the protection of the rights of your citizens. If you're not protecting the rights of your citizens, you have no sovereignty. So we should treat China as a pariah from a political perspective, and then let businesses decide where they want to invest. Now, I think fewer businesses would invest in China if we didn't have an embassy there. Right? But I have a different view of foreign policy that's quite radical, like everything else I believe in, that involves the fact that I believe in open markets. I don't believe in fair trade. Fair trade is a cop-out, and by the way, invented by the left to impose environmental and labor regulations on the third world. I believe in free trade. Free trade means zero tariffs, not trade negotiations. There's nothing to negotiate. I want to buy something from you. You happen to live in a different country. The state has no business telling me I can't buy something from you. So I believe in open. I don't believe goods have a homeland. I don't believe capital has a homeland. And I believe people should choose their homeland. So that is the kind of world I would like to live in. I don't think many of you necessarily would like to live in, but that's the world I'd like to live in. And where government protects our right to make those kind of choices and give us the freedom to make those kind of choices. And so China, in my view, as most of the rest of the world, is a political problem, not an economic problem. China would have nothing. As it restricts itself, it will become poor. And by the way, just in terms of the poor, because you mentioned free markets bring the poor out of poverty. 1 billion people in China have come out of poverty. Let's not forget that. The Chinese are human beings. We should celebrate the fact that 1 billion Chinese, have come out of poverty. It's wonderful. And part of that is our companies did by investing in this. I don't think that's net in terms of humanity. But also the impact of trade with China that has had on the lower middle class and the working class in the Western world has been overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. I'll take you on the economics of it any day. In terms of cheap products, in terms of the kind of labor, in terms of everything. What trade with China has been a net, overwhelmingly positive thing for Europe and the United States, particularly for the poor in those countries. And it is a myth created by the left again, that the working class doesn't benefit from free trade. The working class is exactly who benefits the most from free trade. So, again, freedom works. And when we try to stop freedom, that's when we get into trouble.
Thanks, Yaron. I think we missed a trick by not having you on the national sovereignty panel, but never mind. A question down here, and then another one on the front row, please.
Thank you so much. Once again, it's me, Mitchell Belfer from Eurogulf Information Center. I'm going to focus on China because it seems to be the dragon in the room. It's a bit of a conundrum. China consumes 3 billion eggs every single day. About 1 million they produce and about 2 million they import. Now, I totally agree with free markets, and I think that it's very important that the nation states within Europe also determine the kind of trade deals and the kind of trade that they would like to have with the world. But how do we stop those 2 billion eggs from reaching China? Because that's really the only pressure points that we have right now politically is the food supply that they rely on in order, to continue their development. I'm not saying turn them off. What I'm saying is we have a particular pressure point, just like they have pressure points on us, and that's the food chain. So how do we use that food chain to our advantage without imposing constraints on our freedom to trade?
Mitchell, if it's okay, I might turn that into a slightly different question, which is it okay to restrict China's food chain? And I wonder if Lorenzo, Elmars, or Marko fancy taking that.
Not a great expert in food chain, except for spaghetti and pizza, but... So actually, I don't know how to answer your question on food chain. I agree on the critics that Yaron did on China. We should be more careful dealing with them, even allowing China to enter in the WTO. We are against tariff, so against China and China against us, because as well as Japan has a huge tariff on American cars, for example. So I don't know on food chain, I'm not expert on that. I just want to share a data. Only 13% of the world population live in a country completely free. So let's start on this. 13%. 50% live in a country that are basically highly taxed and completely devastated by tariffs. So this is the starting point. China is a big issue, but we also have internal issues. If we want to save the market, let's start again speaking about fiscal competition. Another big topic that's been facing in G7, G20 right now is the global minimum tax. That's been pushing by the Biden administration when they said that global minimum tax should be at least 50%. So this is killing the free market. This is not saving, according to the left, is saving the free market. No, this is not the free market. This is killing the free market. Think about Ireland. They became rich. They get rid of they stopped being a potato producer and became a microchip producer because the 12.5% of corporate tax. Think about Hungary, 9% of corporate tax, the lowest in Europe, maybe one of the lowest in the Western world. So let's go back to the main point, why we should save the free market from people they are pro-business. This is another something we need to focus on. We are the pro-market coalition. Leftists are the pro-business coalition. So in fact, they want to impose the global minimum tax. They don't like fiscal competition. If European Union can reborn again if the internal market start competing on fiscal issues. This is the only way.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Yeah,
Okay.
do you mind if I don't? Sorry. We'll take a final question here in the front row, please.
Earlier, when Mr. Brook was speaking, he mentioned the fact that people wouldn't revolt because they would be poor. And the thought that pinged into my mind, I don't remember precisely what you said, and I thought, no, they won't, because now we're sending out the checks. And we've had people like Hillary Clinton talk about the need for the universal basic income. So I just feel like there is no free market anymore with China in the room. And I, as a little consumer, was at the Media Mart in Budapest, and I wanted to buy an electric kettle. And I really did not want to buy a made-in-China kettle. And I looked at 20 of them, and I looked at every box, and every one from the Samsung to the Braun to the Hungarian brand, 20 different tea kettles, all made in China. And there is just no way that you can ask a Western business who has to deal with the alphabet soup of regulation to compete on an equal footing with China. That's it.
Thank you. Yaron, why don't you have the final word?
Yeah, I mean, look, and this is what I wanted to say before, so the problem is not China. The problem is the alphabet soup of regulations that we've imposed on ourselves. Stop looking for external reasons, for external causes to the problems we face. The problems we face in the West are self-inflicted. They're in Brussels and they're in Washington. We can compete, we do. The United States today produces more stuff than it's ever produced in all of its history. Produces more stuff than ever, with half the people. Why? Because we have robots. So employment's gone down in production, but we produce more stuff than we ever have. That's the optimistic side. We could produce a lot more if we got rid of the regulations, the controls, the ridiculous taxes, the double, triple, quadruple taxation of some of our income. That's not imposed on us by China. That's imposed on us by ourselves, by leftist and conservative governments over and over and over again, regulating and controlling and growing government. It wasn't China that locked us down. We locked ourselves down. It wasn't China that forced us to send checks to everybody. We did. It's not China that's providing 0% interest rates to everybody and bailing out our zombie companies. It's our Federal Reserve and our central banks that are doing that. If we got our houses in order, China would be insignificant. We'd be so rich and successful.
Thank you very much, Yaron. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Amazingly, the room's actually fuller at the end than it was at the beginning, so you've either heard it was a great panel or you've come for the coffee. Either way, thank you so much for listening, and thank you very much to the panel. And I think we're back in 15 minutes.